The storm was relentless. Wind screamed across the fractured tundra of the Vortexian wastes, dragging sharp-edged snow through the blackened sky like razors through silk. No sane creature would tread this region, not at this hour, not in this season. But Dr. Liam Archer had long since left sanity behind. His boots crunched through hardened snow, each step an act of war against the planet's fury. A beacon pulsed weakly from the handheld scanner he clutched in a gloved hand. The distress signal was fading, its rhythm slower now, more erratic. Another hour and it would be gone, buried beneath the ice or swallowed by the elements. Liam's oxygen mask hissed quietly as he exhaled, the warm mist curling across the frost-bitten air inside his helmet. His back ached beneath the weight of the field medical pack, and his arms stung from exposure despite the suit's insulation. Still, he pressed on. He didn't know who had sent the distress call. It was an old encryption, used by rebel factions that hadn't existed officially for nearly a decade. Whoever had sent it had either been desperate or foolish, or both. Most distress signals out here were pirate traps or false alarms from derelict wrecks. But there was something in the cadence of this one, a rhythm that didn't feel artificial. It felt human. Or close enough. The signal spiked. Liam stopped, squinting through the snow-blind haze. Something dark loomed ahead, a broken half-dome shelter, half swallowed by the shifting ice. Its support beams were twisted. One wall collapsed completely. No heat signature radiated from it, but the scanner insisted this was the source. He approached slowly, boots slipping on the icy slope as he reached the shattered threshold. The doorway had been sealed once, probably long ago, but the storm had torn it open. His flashlight swept through the interior, metal debris, a smashed water recycler, fragments of rations scattered like bones across the floor. And then, a movement, so slight he almost missed it. In the corner of the shelter, beneath a collapsed metal beam, was a figure. At first glance, Liam thought it was a corpse. The body lay twisted, unmoving, covered in a threadbare cloak of dull gray. Then the beamlight caught her face. Blue skin, faintly luminous even in the cold. Dark hair matted with frost. A woman, alien, alive. Barely. Liam dropped to his knees beside her, setting down his medpack with a practiced motion. Her eyes opened a fraction as he touched her throat, feeling for a pulse. Faint, thready. But there. Her skin was dangerously cold, her lips cracked and bluish. Her breathing came in uneven gasps, her chest barely rising beneath the torn fabric. He glanced lower, his hands moving over her body with clinical precision. No bleeding, no broken limbs. But her back. He frowned. Her spine was unnaturally rigid. Her lower body didn't respond when he pressed against her legs. No tension, no twitch. Paralysis. She had a broken back, and someone had left her here. "Hey," he said, voice low but firm, broadcasting through his helmet speaker. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. Then slowly they opened, revealing a pair of eyes the color of midnight fire. She stared at him without recognition. Then she spoke, voice dry and cracked. "Took your time, human." Liam blinked. That was not what he had expected. "You called for help," he said, already preparing a warming gel patch and unsealing the emergency heater. "I didn't," she rasped. "Didn't want anyone to find me." He paused. "Then who?" "Old transmitter," she whispered. "Forgot it was still live." She coughed, the motion shaking her frail frame. "Thought the storm would finish the job." Liam ignored that last part. He was already working, his med scanner running across her torso, checking for internal damage. "You've got fractures in the lower spine," he said. "No signs of infection. But if we don't get your core temperature up, your organs are going to shut down. You've got maybe 20 minutes before your body quits." "Should've quit days ago," she murmured. "Too stubborn." "Well, that makes two of us." He pulled a thermal blanket over her, securing the gel packs against her neck and shoulders. Her breathing slowed slightly, but she didn't close her eyes. She just stared at him, as if trying to decipher something he didn't yet understand. "What's your name?" he asked, carefully strapping a stabilizer harness beneath her arms. She didn't answer for a long time. Then, Tvala. It was a name he had heard before, long ago, on rebel reports. Wanted lists, a traitor they had called her, a criminal, a war hero, some whispered. He looked at her again, this woman with a broken body and iron in her eyes. No, not a traitor, a survivor. The storm threatened to swallow them whole as Liam hoisted Tvala into his arms. She weighed less than expected. Her frame gaunt, her limbs unnaturally thin from prolonged immobility. The stabilizer brace kept her upper body from sagging, but she was utterly limp from the waist down, her legs trailing behind like useless fabric. "Hold on," he said through the wind, though he doubted she had the strength. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breath hot against his neck as he staggered toward the ridge where his crawler was buried beneath snow. The storm fought him every step. Ice lashed his visor. The gale screamed in his ears. His muscles burned, and twice he nearly lost his footing on the slick path. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not now. Not with her heartbeat pulsing faintly against his chest. He reached the crawler, slammed the emergency override. The rear hatch hissed open, and the blast of warm air was like stepping into a new world. He laid her gently on the medical cot inside, stripped the frost-bitten cloth from her body, and began the rewarming process in earnest. IV fluids, heated gel layers, neural stim. Tvala barely stirred, but her body was responding, little by little. Liam hovered over her, his brow furrowed, watching the monitors with wary eyes. When he was satisfied she was no longer in immediate danger, he stepped back and sat heavily in the pilot's chair, tearing off his helmet and drawing a long, ragged breath. Snow pelted the reinforced glass outside. He turned, glancing back at the woman in his med. Tvala, exiled rebel, broken warrior, and now, for better or worse, his patient. The medical scanner beeped again, soft and steady, alive. It was enough for now. But Liam knew this wasn't the end of her story, it was the beginning. Tvala awoke to silence, too complete, too unfamiliar. Her eyes fluttered open, assaulted by soft, ambient lighting, the sterile scent of decontaminated steel in her nose, and a low mechanical hum that buzzed beneath her skin like a buried engine. It wasn't the cold she felt first, nor the pain, but weightlessness. A sickening float inside her own body. She moved to sit up and immediately learned two things. First, that her back was braced by something rigid and unfamiliar, supporting her spine in a way that kept her upright. Second, that her legs didn't respond. Not even a twitch. She lay back against the cot and stared at the ceiling, the breath leaving her lungs in a slow, tight exhale. She remembered the snow, the storm, the human. Her eyes narrowed. "You've been out for about 19 hours, came the voice from across the cabin, which is honestly kind of impressive considering the shape you were in. Liam Archer leaned against the wall near the diagnostics table, a mug of something hot in his hand, and the look of a man who'd been watching over a ticking time bomb with no manual to defuse it. Tvala blinked at him. He didn't look like the image of human medics she had been raised with. There was no pristine uniform, no straight-backed officiousness, just a rugged, frost-weathered man in thermal cargo gear, eyes weary and intelligent, posture relaxed but alert. "You should have left me," she said without emotion. "I get that a lot," Liam replied with a slight tilt of his head. "Usually right before someone vomits all over my shoes and asks for a sedative." Her lips pressed into a line. "I mean it. You risked exposure, loss of fuel, medical resources to save a broken stranger." He nodded once. "Yep, you're a fool." "I get that a lot too." The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. She wasn't offering gratitude, and he wasn't asking for it. But in the stillness between them, there was something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or a challenge. Tvala turned her head, the soft hiss of the rebreather near her cot releasing its automatic stream. "You know who I am." "Yeah," Liam said. Tvala, former resistance commander, rebel insurgent, the one who supposedly tried to collapse the Coalition's planetary blockade on Gyro 7 with a modified mining core and a death wish. "You forgot, war criminal." "I figured you'd bring that up yourself." She studied him, unsure how to respond. Most humans would have started with that, accusations, threats, chains. But he hadn't even asked her what she had done. "Just saved her life." "Why?" she asked. "Why what?" "Why save me? You had to know who I was." "I did," he said, "but you were also dying, and I'm a medic." "That's not a real answer." "No," he said, "but it's mine." Tvala closed her eyes. Exhaustion pressed at the edges of her consciousness, but it wasn't from her body. It was from the weight of a life that had been slipping away long before the cold set in. "You don't know what I've done," she said, more to herself than him. "I don't need to," Liam replied quietly. "I saw someone broken, abandoned, and freezing to death. I don't care if you used to be a queen or a pirate, you were still someone worth saving." She opened her eyes again. Something unspoken sat between them now. Not quite trust, not yet, but something more than suspicion. Then he moved, placing the mug on the diagnostics console. "You've got spinal trauma," he said. "The neural connections below your T7 vertebra are severed. It's not permanent, but it's close." "Permanent enough," she murmured. "There's still a chance," he said. "I've started nanorepair therapy. If we can stabilize the surrounding tissue, I might be able to rebuild the severed link." "You'd go through all that for me?" He shrugged. "It's a long winter, and I don't like to lose patience." She stared at him, uncertain whether to believe him or herself. She had known humans as conquerors, enemies, but not like this. Not kind, not quiet, not stubbornly, stupidly good. Tvala turned away from him. "Fine, but I'm not your charity case." "No," Liam said, his voice softer. "You're my responsibility." And somehow that made it harder to breathe. Days bled into nights, and nights into longer silences. The storm outside remained unbroken, turning the planet's surface into a killing field of ice and white fire. Inside the insulated outpost, Liam tended to her with the patience of a monk and the precision of a soldier. Tvala had never been still this long in her life. Her body betrayed her with every breath she could not take without pain. Every moment her legs refused to remember how to move. But the harder part, the part she never admitted, was the vulnerability. She hated being seen like this. Weak, helpless, stuck in a hovering cot while a human changed the nanogel dressings on her back. Liam didn't treat her like she was fragile. He didn't baby her. He didn't ask stupid questions or pretend he understood her pain. He just worked, quiet and efficient, sometimes telling stories to fill the silence, stories of other patients, of old cities she'd never seen, of the life he'd left behind when he joined the Interstellar Humanitarian Corps. She started speaking more too, hesitantly at first, testing the weight of words she hadn't used in years. "My people betrayed me," she said one night when the lights were dim and Liam was adjusting the spinal brace. "I was too loud, too defiant. I didn't want to become what they were shaping the resistance into, so they handed me over to the coalition during the surrender talks. Claimed I was rogue, that I had disobeyed. They broke my back themselves before dropping me outside the treaty zone, made sure I wouldn't crawl back." Liam paused in his work. "That's why you didn't want help." "I thought dying in the snow would be cleaner. You should have tried drowning. No frostbite involved." To her surprise, a laugh broke from her throat. Small, sharp, but real. She met his gaze. "You're the worst comforter in the galaxy." "Probably," Liam agreed, then added, "but I'm also the one who's going to make sure you walk again." Her breath caught. There were days she believed him. Not because of medical records, not because of science, but because he wanted it to happen so fiercely that she couldn't help but want it too. He built her a mobility rig, part hoverboard, part exoskeleton, designed to keep her spine supported while letting her move independently. The first time she stood upright with its help, she trembled from the strain, her muscles twitching with fatigue, but her eyes lit with something he hadn't seen since that night in the storm: defiance. He adjusted the rig and steadied her when she faltered. She snapped at him when he offered to help too much, and bit back curses through clenched teeth when her body refused to obey. But he never pitied her, and she never asked him to. "You're stubborn," she told him. "You started it," he replied. Their rhythm became something neither of them expected. Two broken souls orbiting one another, drawn together by shared silence and unlikely warmth. In the coldest corner of the galaxy, something began to thaw. Not just her spine, not just her body, but the barricades they had each built in the name of survival. One night, as she hovered near the viewport, wrapped in a thermal cloak, Liam joined her and handed her a cup of steamberry tea. She took it, fingers brushing his. Neither of them spoke. Outside, the storm finally began to break. Thin shafts of light pierced the clouds, casting a glimmer over the frozen wastes. "Looks like spring's coming early," he murmured. Tvala didn't answer, but she leaned just slightly against him. And for once, she didn't feel so heavy inside her skin. The human outpost that had once felt like a sterile tomb slowly transformed into something else. Not a home. Tvala would never call it that, but a sanctuary. The walls still pulsed with the low hum of electrical systems, and the artificial gravity still jerked slightly when the solar batteries dipped into reserve. But the silence no longer felt like isolation. It felt like space. Space to breathe, to think, and to endure. And she was enduring. The mobility rig had evolved over the weeks, its frame growing sleeker as Liam modified it to better suit her alien physiology. The first prototype had been clumsy, heavy, a crude exoskeletal harness more suited for lifting crates than restoring dignity. But Liam had worked late into the frozen nights, scanning every inch of her neural pathways, listening to her frustrated snarls when the system locked up, and improving it line by line. Tvala didn't thank him. Not once, but she didn't have to. Liam read it in the way she stopped flinching when he adjusted the rig's spinal alignment, in the way she didn't turn away when he met her eyes, in the way she started trying. Every day, she pushed herself farther than he expected. First, lifting her own weight without help, then walking, one step, then another, across the metallic flooring with trembling legs wrapped in artificial muscle fibers. Sometimes, the pain was so bad, she shook. Not just in her spine, but in her heart. Her pride, long her strongest weapon, had been broken alongside her back. Being held upright by someone else, by a human, was the worst kind of humiliation for someone who once commanded fleets. But Liam never mocked her, never patronized her. He only watched, hands at the ready in case she fell. One afternoon, after hours of training in silence, she collapsed onto the floor beside the heating unit, sweat beading across her temple, breath ragged. Her legs refused to respond. The rig's servos shut down from overheating, and her body felt like shattered glass. Liam crouched beside her. "You're pushing too hard." "I need to," she growled, eyes narrowed. I need to walk without this machine." "You will," he said, softly but with certainty. "But not if you destroy what's left of your nervous system." She bit her lip, looked away. Her hand clenched on the floor beside her. "My legs don't feel like mine," she admitted. "They will," Liam said, his voice low. "It takes time. The body learns again, so does the soul." She looked at him then, eyes burning. "My soul doesn't want to learn. It wants to fight." His expression didn't change. "Then fight smart." That night, she allowed him to lift her to the cot without protest. And when he tucked a support pillow behind her, she whispered something he barely heard. "You talk too much for a medic." He smiled faintly. "That's a lie." She didn't deny it. But she didn't say anything else. The next morning she stood unsupported for 6 seconds. Liam counted every one. The cold still ruled the world outside, but the worst of the storms had passed. With sunlight finally breaking through the clouds, the distant mountain range shimmered with ice crystals. Tvala stood at the threshold of the outpost's main hangar, wrapped in a deep black cloak stitched together from Liam's spare environmental fabrics. Her mobility rig silent, deactivated. She no longer needed it just to stand. Mika, the scavenger drone, hovered nearby, chirping contentedly as it scanned the terrain for signs of incoming weather. Tvala ignored it. Her mind was elsewhere, deep in places that no amount of frost could freeze. Liam approached from behind, footsteps quiet but deliberate. He stopped beside her, following her gaze toward the horizon. "They're looking for you." "You know," he said. "I know. I intercepted a signal 2 nights ago. Coalition scouts passed through Sector 12. They're pinging for rebel biosignatures. Someone out there knows you survived." Tvala didn't flinch. "They'll come eventually." "Do you want to run?" She turned to him. Her silver eyes glinted with something unreadable. "No," she said. "I want them to see me walk." Liam didn't respond at first. He simply looked at her, the woman who had once been a myth to him. A name in a report, a footnote in a rebellion. Now standing, jaw clenched against the wind, alive and defiant. "You've changed," he said. "Or I've remembered who I was before they tried to break me," she replied. "Before the war, before betrayal, I was more than a fighter. I had a name, a people, a future." She looked at her hands, long fingers, calloused from old sword training, stained by battle and now by recovery. "I had a family once." Liam's breath caught, not from surprise but because he heard something new in her voice. Loss. "What happened?" he asked gently. "They killed them," she whispered. "When they couldn't control me, they found a way to hurt me. My bondmate, my daughter, burned the shelter they were hiding in, called it a cleansing operation, collateral damage." Liam lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry. I told myself revenge would fill the hole." Perhaps, she continued. "I fought harder, smarter, but nothing stopped the emptiness. Not until," she trailed off. He turned to her, but she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The silence between them grew thick, not with pain, but with something fragile, something beginning. He reached out slowly, letting his hand brush hers. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. Later, they sat beside the outpost's main heater, watching the sunset through the viewport. Her legs were curled beneath her, the muscles sore but functional. He handed her a steaming mug of spiced synthroot, and she accepted it wordlessly. "You could leave," he said after a long pause. "Once you're strong enough, disappear. Take a new name. Start again." "And what would you do if I did?" He chuckled softly. "Get frostbite waiting for a signal that doesn't come." She looked at him sideways, her voice quiet. "You're a fool." He nodded. "You've said that before. And yet you stay." "Yeah," he said. "I do." Tvala stared into the cup in her hands, her reflection warping in the surface of the drink. Then, slowly, she said the words that surprised even herself. "If I stay," she murmured, "will you keep fixing what's broken?" Liam leaned toward her, his voice roughened with something unsaid. "I'm not here to fix you," he said. "I'm here to stand with you until you're whole again." Tvala didn't respond with words. She didn't have to. Instead, she reached out, and this time it was her hand that found his. Her grip was stronger than he expected. Unyielding. Together, they watched the sun vanish behind the frozen cliffs, and in that quiet moment, between the ghosts of her past and the promise of something new, Tvala, once a rebel queen without a future, finally allowed herself to believe in one. The thaw came slowly on Vortexia, like a memory returning to a long-forgotten mind. For weeks, the snow had begun to recede, crawling back across the plains, unveiling fractured stone and iron roots beneath. The outpost remained tucked within its frost-bitten valley, but the worst of the winter had passed. Inside, the silence between Liam and Tvala had changed. It was no longer one of hesitation or the breath-holding tension of strangers trapped together by fate. Now it was charged with something else, an invisible thread pulled tighter with every word, every glance, every unspoken admission neither dared to voice aloud. Liam knew it the moment he stopped seeing her as just a survivor. He had known wounded people before, civilians, soldiers, war criminals, all of them cracked beneath the weight of living. But Tvala had never truly cracked. She had refused to die, refused to collapse, refused to surrender her identity, even when every piece of her had been broken. And now, she walked, not perfectly. Her left leg still dragged slightly when she tired, and the mobility rig remained within reach. But she walked with her back straight and her jaw high, eyes forward, like a woman who would no longer be caged. She no longer needed Liam. But she chose to stay. On the third morning of the thaw, Liam found her out beyond the eastern ridge, where the snow had melted enough to reveal the cracked metal skeletons of an old rebel communications array. She sat atop one of the towers, her silhouette sharp against the gray sky, sword in her lap, hair swept up in a braid he had never seen her wear before. He approached slowly, watching her from below. "You're quiet," he said. She didn't look down. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous habit." "Necessary one," she replied. "I've spent most of my life fighting wars I didn't start. Wars I didn't even want. And I told myself that if I fought hard enough, if I bled for the right cause, then maybe it would mean something in the end." Liam rested a hand on the cold metal beneath his boots. "And now?" Tvala finally turned to him, her gaze calm but unreadable. "Now I wonder if meaning was ever the point. Maybe it was never about revenge or victory. Maybe it was about surviving long enough to learn what else there could be." He took a slow breath. "And what have you learned?" She stood, slowly, but without assistance, and looked down at him. "That some wounds heal," she said, "and some stay with you forever, but they don't have to define who you are after the war ends." She descended the tower carefully, each step steady. When she reached him, she stopped barely a breath away. "You gave me back something I didn't think I deserved." "I didn't give you anything you didn't fight for," Liam replied, voice low. She stared at him for a long time. The silence stretched between them, heavy and close. Then she spoke again. "My people won't forgive me," she said. "Not for surviving, not for walking away." "They don't have to," Liam said. "You don't owe them anything." Tvala looked at him, and for the first time there was no steel in her eyes, only fire. "Then I choose something else," she said. "Something for me." and without waiting for permission, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was not soft, not hesitant. It was a warrior's kiss, deliberate, precise, claimed with both hands and no apologies. Liam didn't resist. He kissed her back as though everything he had held silent for weeks was finally allowed to speak. When they parted, neither of them said anything. There was no need. They had already chosen. The wedding, when it happened, wasn't ceremonial. There were no banners, no witnesses, no rituals performed under alien suns. There was only a woman who had survived the unthinkable, and a man who had chosen to save her, not because she was noble, or useful, or necessary, but because she mattered. Tvala wore a woven cloak over her shoulders, black and crimson, stitched from Liam's old uniform scraps and what remained of her rebel colors. Her hair was bound in tight coils, each lock adorned with a silver thread pulled from a salvaged comms line, the last echo of the rebellion that had once defined her. Liam stood across from her beneath the thawing sky, wearing his medic's coat with the sleeves rolled up and grease still on his hands from calibrating her spinal servos that morning. His vows were not scripted. His voice shook as he spoke, not from nerves, but from awe, because he had never expected to find something like this, let alone earn it. "I don't want to fix you," he said. "I want to walk with you, to carry the weight when it gets too heavy, and to laugh with you when it doesn't." Tvala nodded once, and when she answered, her voice carried the same fire it always had. But beneath it, something softer bloomed. "I was a weapon once, then I was a ghost. You reminded me I was a person." She placed her hand in his. Her grip was strong. "I won't be easy," she warned. "I'll always be sharp, always a little dangerous." He smiled. "I wouldn't have survived this planet without dangerous." When they kissed, it was not the ending of a story. It was a reckoning, a promise. Tvala didn't stop being who she was. She didn't dissolve into a role or pretend that her past had never happened. She was still fierce, still scarred. But now she was not alone. The outpost changed again, slowly. Together they rebuilt it. Modular expansions, solar arrays, comms boosted enough to reach the nearest trade hub. She helped repair the antenna arrays, taught Liam how to fight with a blade. He taught her how to wire transistors and synthesize nutrient patches. They slept side by side, not because they needed warmth, but because there was finally someone worth waking up beside. And when they fought like survivors, not to win, but to understand. One night, after she returned from a long walk across the new green shoots blooming in the valley below, she found him repairing a broken medbay panel. He looked up as she entered. "Trouble out there?" he asked. "Only the wind," she said. She leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed. "I was thinking," she said, "you're not a bad medic." He raised an eyebrow. "Thanks," she stepped closer. "But you're a better husband." Then she kissed him again, and this time it was gentle. The storm had passed, and for the first time in her life, Tvala finally understood what it meant to choose peace. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The name she once bore as a rebel leader faded from the lips of her enemies. But in this quiet place across the stars, one name remained, the one she had taken for herself. Tvala Archer. It was in the early morning, when mist still clung to the thawed ridgelines and the sky blushed with the first hints of amber, that the shadows returned. Tvala sensed it before she saw it. The way the birds went silent. The subtle shift in the hum of the wind. Even the ground beneath her boots felt different. Just enough to raise the hairs on the back of her neck. She dropped the data tablet she'd been working with and turned toward the tree line, her breath curling in the crisp air. And then she saw it, just past the perimeter sensors, half-cloaked in camouflage and bearing no insignia. A shuttle settled into the earth like a serpent coiled in silence. Coalition black. Her hand went to her hip by instinct, gripping the hilt of her blade. She had long since stopped carrying a plasma pistol. That felt too impersonal. She wasn't afraid of the past anymore. She wanted to look it in the eye when it came for her. The shuttle's door opened. 5 figures emerged. No announcement. No weapons drawn, yet. But they walked like wolves. Coordinated. Unhurried. Liam emerged from the side bay, wiping grease from his hands, the faint sound of music still playing from the internal speakers of his workbench. He stopped the moment he saw her face. "They're here, aren't they?" She didn't speak. Just nodded. Liam moved to stand beside her, tall and calm, his presence a steady wall at her side. The lead officer approached. His armor was matte, faceless. A tactical helmet hid his features, but she knew him by his voice the moment he spoke. Tvala, rebel general, war criminal. His voice was low, rehearsed, without emotion. You are to be taken into custody under Article 17 of the Interplanetary Justice Accord. She smirked. You're years too late. You're still under indictment. Liam took a step forward, his voice firm. She's under my care. You've got no legal ground to detain her. This is a neutral rehabilitation zone. Your jurisdiction doesn't extend here. The officer turned toward him. We're not here for negotiations. I wasn't offering any, Liam replied. There was a long silence. Then, slowly, Tvala stepped forward. I'm not hiding, she said, voice clear. I haven't been hiding. I've lived. I've healed. You can call me a criminal. But I have earned my life back. You don't get to decide that, the officer replied. No, she said, but neither do you. The second the officer reached for his sidearm, Liam moved. His body slammed into Tvala, knocking her back just as the first plasma bolt ripped through the air. It struck the ground behind them, exploding in a flash of light and dirt. Tvala rolled, came up on one knee, blade drawn. Liam fired a concussive round from a modified med launcher, striking one of the soldiers directly in the chest. The man crumpled backward with a grunt. The fight lasted only moments. Tvala moved like a dancer with teeth, fluid, deadly, beautiful. The blade flashed in her hand, striking armor, cutting through hesitation. Liam backed her with calculated precision, targeting limbs, disabling with non-lethal force. The last of the soldiers staggered, raised his arm, and Tvala caught it mid-air, twisted, and brought him to his knees. She held her blade to his throat. You can run back to them, she said. Tell them I'm alive. Tell them I'm walking. Tell them I'm free. But if they come again, her voice dropped into ice. I won't let them walk away. The soldier nodded frantically. She released him. The shuttle left without another word. Later that night, Liam sat beside her at the fire pit they had built months ago. Her hand rested on his thigh, not tightly, but with certainty. I thought I was finished with war, she whispered. You are, he replied, but that doesn't mean it's finished with you. I don't want to fight anymore. You didn't fight today to destroy, you fought to defend. She looked at him then. And if I keep having to fight, will you still stay? He turned toward her, and the firelight caught the lines of his face, until the end. She didn't answer with words. She didn't need to. Her hand found his and held on. And the stars, for the first time in years, didn't feel so far away. Seasons passed, and the snow never returned with quite the same fury. The outpost flourished with small miracles, seedlings sprouting in hydrobeds, solar panels gleaming under persistent sun, and laughter echoing between steel walls once meant only for survival. Tvala moved with ease now. Her legs were strong again, scarred by memory, but faithful beneath her. Liam continued to patch up traders, travelers, and the occasional fool who wandered too close to the ravine and forgot how gravity worked. But the real work, the hard work, was what they built between them. They had no anniversary to mark. No ceremony. Just a shared moment, one afternoon, when Liam caught her watching him from across the workshop. She stood leaning in the doorway, arms folded, lips quirked in amusement, as he tried again to rewire the AI assistant and nearly electrocuted himself in the process. I don't suppose you'd consider taking my name, he muttered, not looking at her. I'd rather break my arm, she answered without missing a beat. Sounds like a yes. And she smiled. That night, she took a piece of molten alloy and etched her old name into it, Tvala of the Fallen Shard. Then, below it, with hands that no longer trembled, she added one more word. Archer. When she handed it to him, he didn't say anything. He just held it like something sacred. From then on, the galaxy forgot who she had been. They didn't speak of the blade-wielding rebel or the war criminal or the fugitive ghost in the snow. But in one quiet corner of space, she was remembered. Not for her battles or her losses or the wounds etched into her spine. She was remembered for surviving, and for choosing love, not vengeance, and for marrying the only man in the stars foolish enough and kind enough to walk into a storm just to pull her back out.